Welcome to the Eastern Caribbean Center's Research Pipeline Interview Protocol Development. This is the third course in the ECC Research Pipeline Training Series. Our session today will be taught by Dr. Verleen McSween, a STEM educator and a biomedical researcher, who is also the Director of Mentoring and Research Infrastructure at VI-EPSCoR, and Dr. Nishika Edwards of the University of South Carolina School of Medicine, Greenville.
Everyone that's on the call, for those that'll be watching this video later, we are elated that you are sharing space with us on today as we are preparing to continue this work around developing our research skills and developing rigorous and high quality products, regardless of what it is that you're deciding to focus your research on. We are in the last session for the research pipeline for fall 2023. And today we're going to be focusing on interview protocol development. And so we can go to the next slide. All right. So we want to make sure that we always point out the fact that there is expertise. We have two guest presenters today. One is our partner, but we are initiating this work through the Eastern Caribbean Center, which has over 40 years, so y'all see my good typo in here, of experience in data collection, research methodology, and report development for local and federal government. And again, because we are based here in the U.S. Virgin Islands and in the Caribbean, we always are using a strength-focused and culturally responsive research strategy around how we engage. And so we're going to encourage the same with you. Let's go to the next slide. And so our wonderful guest today will include a dear friend and colleague, Dr. Verleen McSween, who is a biomedical as well as a professor in biology here at the University of the Virgin Islands in the School of Math and Science. She's also the Mentoring and Research Infrastructure Director for the Virgin Island Institute for STEM Education Research and Practice, which is a component of VI-EPSCoR, which is a $20 million grant here in the region to boost research rigor and economic opportunities. She's also a co-PI for the Undergraduate Research Training Initiative for Student Enhancement, the RISE grant, that is funded through NIH. Next slide. And I think I'm going to turn this on over to you. Are you ready, Ms. McSween? Dr. McSween?
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Hi, everyone. As Dr. Cummings mentioned, I'm Dr. McSween. And so I just wanted to start you out with a growth mindset activity. So as Dr. Cummings mentioned, all the activities that I'm a part of, and I have a PhD in vision science, and I also do some STEM education work. But to be able to get through all of those steps, parts of that sort of very long journey that can be really challenging at times, we have to have a particular mindset to help us to be able to get through, because it's not always going to be smooth. And so part of that experience involves what's called failing up. It's basically where we can derive gain in spite of a failure or perceived failure that would usually either preclude that gain or actually have adverse consequences. So for example, when I was in graduate school, I was almost finished, but not quite finished. And my PhD advisor, he was actually awarded another position, basically a promotion at another university, right, several hundred miles away. And so I had the opportunity to either go with him to that institution or stay where I was. And so I decided to stay where I was to finish up. And so that was really challenging because I no longer had my PhD advisor right there with me. And so that definitely was a setback for me, but I was able to still derive gain from that experience because I had to transition to another lab. As I was working on my write-up, I was able to get funding to work sort of as a postdoc / research assistant. And through that experience, I was able to learn a whole new slew of techniques that basically improved my marketability as a research scientist. And so sometimes things can occur as part of even our research process that basically can seem as a setback to us. But we have the ability to sort of change or turn those situations around to see what kinds of benefits or potential opportunities might come from those experiences. So those could potentially be new skills that we've developed, new experiences, even new connections or networks that we're able to build as part of those experiences. And so I love the quote from Samuel Beckett, which shares that ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better. So when we think about failing, right, we usually think of it as something that's negative. But in this particular perspective, he's saying that failing is basically part of the process. If we're not failing at something, it means that we're not growing. If we're trying new experiences, we're definitely going to have times when, things don't work out as planned. And so in this particular image on the left, what it's showing us here is just a few of the actual inventions or discoveries that have been made as, part of science or industry over the years. And these inventions or discoveries were actually by accident. So these individuals could have seen these, discoveries or encounters as basically a setback, but this actually revealed something that they weren't even looking for, that actually changed a lot of the way of how we do things, opened up new areas or fields of science, for example. And there are lots of other examples, but these are just a few. So what I want you to do is to think about an experience that you've had. It could pertain to research or academia, and think about how that particular experience maybe seemed like a setback or something negative, and think about a way now that you could sort of turn that same experience around to make it positive, right? So I'll repeat that again. So think about something either in your research or in your academia that has been something that could be perceived as negative, but now you're going to use that to fail up, to be able to turn that situation around to derive some gain or something positive from it. So I'll give you a few seconds to think about that. And let's have maybe two people share their experience with us. So I'll give you a few more seconds and then see if you can find something that you'd be willing to share with the rest of us. Right. So let's see. Deshona, you think you have something that you might want to share?
As a fail up?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I like to share that I am a college dropout. I did not complete community college at home, but I now have a PhD, so I am a university graduate.
Nice.
So I love that one.
And the area that you maybe wanted to start out in the community college, that area of study, is it different or the same?
It's science overall for me. So that was what they offered at the time, was environmental science. That was the closest thing to biology at the time. But now my PhD is in health psychology. So I am still within the realm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice, thank you. Do you have anyone else who might want to share their experience of failing up? Let's try LaWanda. She always has good stories.
I knew he was going to call on me. For failing up, I remember when I was in graduate school and I wrote a grant. I was so excited. We was doing the thing, in the community, working with students, teachers, and I did my IRB paperwork to submit so I could do my dissertation. I was like, I am halfway done. I wrote the proposal. And the woman who was over the center never pressed the send button on the IRB application.
Wow.
And I had lots of emotions and things about it. But her not doing that, because then after that she got sick, and it was just a real interesting set of moments, right? And the grants went well. We did the things that we needed to do, but it forced me to return back to some research and work that I had done prior with another researcher to finish out my dissertation. And it brought me back into the mentoring space, back into STEM education and research, right? Because I had left. I was out doing leadership and some other stuff. And so I'm really grateful because getting back into that work, failing literally backwards, but actually failing up, allowed me to be able to become an expert in that area and essentially launch my career in STEM education, intervention, design, and research. And so I guess I should say thank you. I didn't want to say thank you at the time. I wanted to do the laying on the hands, but it was, sometimes one closed door really gives us a much clearer direction around where we invest our energy. And there's a researcher at the time, a professor, who told me, he said, LaWanda, we all get one bucket of sand. And so we have to be really selective over where we dump it, where is it going to be the most impactful? So I'm really appreciative.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so I just want to close again with ever tried, ever failed. No matter, try again, fail better. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Edwards.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about interview protocol development. But first, I want to share a few things about me. So I am a native of Orangeburg, South Carolina. Don't know if anybody have been to the South, very rural area. The biggest thing we have going on there are the 2 HBCU colleges. Transformational leader. I consider myself a lifelong educator. So even though I have a terminal degree, I'm still in classes right now, taking intro to psych with a bunch of students that's half my age. I have a undergrad in elementary education. So I used to be an elementary school teacher, taught 3rd grade and 2nd grade, and I worked as an academic interventionist. I have 2 master's degree in education, and then my terminal degree is in educational leadership with a specialization in higher ed, which led me here to University of South Carolina School of Medicine in Greenville. I am the Educational Research Program Coordinator, which pretty much stands for I coordinate over an NIH grant. So it's an NIH R25 grant, which allows me to be able to do research. And that's where I was able to meet Dr. McSween and Dr. Cummings at the VI-EPSCoR state conference that they had in South Carolina last September. My hobbies are reading, writing, traveling, shopping, cooking, eating, spending time with friends and family. So just a little bit about me. And I have used qualitative research and interviews. First started using it while I was teaching. I used to interview some of my students, but I didn't really think of it like research. I just thought of it as I wanted to know what they were thinking about, how they felt about certain things. And then in advance to my first graduate degree, and then to my doctorate degree, I use interviews as well. And then I currently use interviews with the scholars here in the program. So I interviewed them to kind of pick their brains. I like to tell them that because they're in STEM, they're doing all the great research on breast cancer and artificial intelligence and C. elegans and all those great things, but I get to research them. I get to pick their brain to figure out why did they choose to become doctors or physical assistants, physical therapists, and how do they feel about their beliefs in that particular thing? So I use the interviews in that regard currently. So just like a brief overview, sometimes we get to know who's speaking to us, but they don't get to know who they're talking to. So if somebody wants to tell me their name, one thing about them, and if they're considering using interviews, and we logged into the peer deck. So if you don't want to share out loud, this is great because you can just type it on your phone and it'll show up here who you are and what you have going on. So once again, it's tell me your name, one thing you want me to know about you, and if you're considering interviews. And it could be something funny, it could be something about your research, it could be something about your profession, anything that you would like for me to know.
Good day, everyone. My name is Nicole Barker. I am into educational leadership as well. And yes, I am planning on using interviews as a part of my research method.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Nice to meet you.
Thanks.
Anybody else want to share?
Yes, good afternoon. I am Sherry Wheatley, and I'm in the CLIP program at the University of Virgin Islands. And my focus is on growth mindset, but looking at it in the baby boomers. And I'm planning on using questions as well.
Okay, okay. Two
Yes.
people. I
So
see.
trying to bring out the essence, phenomenology.
Okay, okay. I see
Thank you.
Verleen's typing. Anybody else want to share? So Verleen is considering using interviews to understand mentored experiences of students. Okay. Anybody
Hi.
else before we move on?
Hi, good day. My name is Aishi Bulu. I'm at the Eastern Caribbean Center at UVI and just interested to glean from you guys' experiences.
Okay, nice to meet you. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. So today, very brief, but we want to get into some best practices for planning and implementing an interview, since a lot of you are planning to do so. And then the advantages and disadvantages of using a structured versus an unstructured interview. You can use either or. And then we want to identify some components of an interview protocol design. So there's different ways to do it. And I have some brief little activities, and that could be the elementary educator in me coming out, just to kind of keep us engaged and to see, like, are you really grasping the concepts? So on here, draw a type, 2 things you already know about today's topics, which are interviews. 2 things, and if you don't want to put it in here, you can share out like you did for the last one. 2 things that you already know about interviews. I'm sure everybody knows something about interviews. Everybody had to interview for their program that they're in, for their job that they're in. So 2 things that you know currently about interviews. You can either put it in here or you can share out. All right, somebody deleted their response. Okay, good. Do not lead your respondent.
How do you type it in?
So did you okay, generate rapport with your interviewee? Did you log into the www.p
Yes.
it should be on your phone and it should come up
Oh, I didn't log in on my phone. Sorry, I logged in on my computer.
on your computer. So I've actually never used it on a computer as far as like being a participant, but you should be able to go back to that same screen and write.
Okay.
There's a
Well, I'm
T on the
just gonna
bottom,
say,
Sherry.
the questions should be open-ended, so that way people could start to talk.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I think clear your mind of bias. Okay, thanks. Somebody was saying something about maybe the computer version of PureDat. Who was that?
That was Aishi. Aishi was giving some instructions. Aishi, you said there's a T on the bottom of the site.
Yes, correct. There's when I go to it, I see a bunch of colors, and I don't know if you see that, Sherry, to the bottom.
On the screen?
On the screen, yeah, it says draw type 2 things, right? And then it has a bunch of shades of colors. Do you see that in your slide? Because my slide deck automatically changes whenever they change a slide. So I'm on slide 9. It says slide 9, drawing response slide.
I'm sorry, I might be a little bit challenged with this. I'll figure it out though.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, I was just gonna say
Thank you.
after the colors, there's a pencil, a highlighter, a line, and then there's a T
Okay,
that you can
yeah,
use
I
for
see it
text.
now. Thank you.
Okay,
I see
all
it.
right.
Thank you for that. You actually taught me something. I've been on here as a participant, but I've always just had my phone, so it was more convenient. So thanks for that. All right, so we all know what an interview is, but an interview is a method used to gain understanding and learn about the experiences of someone else. So when you're going for a job, they're trying to see if you are a great fit as a candidate for the role that you're applying for. And then in research, you're trying to understand somebody's perspective of an experience that they've gone through. So the purpose of an interview is the same, but the data that you're trying to collect will be different depending on what you're interviewing for. So some benefits of using interviews, since many of you are going to use interviews, it offers insight And like I was telling Dr. Cummings before we actually started this presentation, that sometimes qualitative data, especially using interviews, will give you insight into information that you can't get with a survey, especially a survey that gives like a response. You can pick a number, whereas with an interview, people can expand on what they're saying. So they could say, no, I do not like this class, but they can tell you why they don't like the class. And it also can give you a lot of data, especially depending on what question you ask the person and then how responsive the person is. So some people can be long-winded, and for some that could be a lot, but then for others that could gauge more information, and it could present viable topics that you want to delve more deeply into. And then it also gives you the chance to describe people in advance. So everybody has done an interview at some point in time. What makes you feel comfortable during an interview? And you can write for this one as well. What makes you feel comfortable when you're in an interview? I know like some people do not like those interviews where you have like 6 people in there, or 3 or 4 people. Some people do not like the interviews where, I know I didn't have to do this personally, but people who came up teaching after me, they had to actually teach a model lesson to the people that were the interview panel. Some people did not like that, kind of put you on the spot. So we have, I like hearing other people's perspectives. Okay. Eye contact. I think eye contact is good. The person who conducts the interview has respect for the view. Okay. I think that's important as well. Questions that aren't intimidating. Okay. Allowing you to share without judgment. I think that's also important as well. I think for me too, active listening. So for what I mean by that is, for instance, someone asks you a question at the beginning of the interview, and then they ask you something later on that kind of deals with what you said in a previous question, and they can come back and regurgitate back to you what you already said and maybe ask you to expound on it. So it lets you know they're actually listening, but then it also kind of gives you insight into, they may find that interesting, or maybe something that they're looking into, which is good information for you. And then also allowing you to skip questions that you're not comfortable with. I think that's very good too. So some best practices for developing an interview. Location is everything. So you want to pick some place where the person is going to feel comfortable, so they can feel like they want to be able to share the information with you. So for an example, if you're trying to interview someplace, and let's say Starbucks, that's crowded, it's a bunch of people. If somebody's fearful that someone may hear personal information that they're giving out, they may not tell you exactly what they would have told you if it was a private or a quiet setting. So that also ties into make sure it's free of distractions. So I know when I was doing my dissertation and I was interviewing undergraduate students, I would let them pick the location, but I would tell them, do you know a location that you would prefer, that you're familiar with, that would be free of distractions? So sometimes we might meet on campus, but outside, but kind of like sitting far away from other people, so that way they can talk without somebody else listening. Sometimes we would do virtual depending on what was going on, and they couldn't meet with me in person. So that's something to keep in mind as well. You want them to feel as comfortable as possible so that they can share confidential information with you if it is a confidential thing. So like, for example, now I currently, I'm in the room that I normally do interviews with for our scholars for the program, and there's never anybody else in here with me when I'm doing it. So that way they feel comfortable to share information with me. Another tip, you want to establish trust with them. So a way to establish trust first starts with the environment. When you let them see that you're able to pick some place that makes them feel comfortable enough to share, but you also have to make sure that your tone is one of respect. I know respect was mentioned in the previous prompt. So making sure they feel like you're inviting them to share, but not kind of like fussing or yelling or leading them into questions as well. And then sometimes instead of jumping right into the interview questions, use some conversation starters to get to know them, to make them feel like you actually care about them, and not so much of, okay, I need to see if you're good for this job, or if you're good for this research, or I only care about what your responses are. And you can do that by making yourself relatable. telling them what your experience might be. Or if you ask them a conversation starter and they say something that connects with you, you may share a similar hobby, school interest, or something like that. You can use to establish trust between you and the person that you're interviewing. Another one is follow the procedures. Make sure you have an informed consent form, and that should be able to explain what your research is, why you're doing it, and most importantly, what are the risks and the benefits. So that way they'll know upfront what they're getting themselves into, and they'll have the option to withdraw prior to the research. And then it'll also give them the opportunity to agree to everything that's coming along with the research, including conducting the interview. You also need to make sure your equipment works. At the beginning of the interview, you need to ask them, can you record, to make sure they're comfortable with it. And then if you have a script, ask the outline questions that are given. And this will, of course, be after you do the conversation starters, if you're going to do that, or if you engage in conversation to make yourself relatable to the person. So a lot of times you'll already have this informed consent form, because IRB usually requires that you send one, and then you get it back from the person that you're interviewing as well. So you also want to listen actively. So you show them that you're listening actively to them by maintaining eye contact. And if they say something, so like, for example, I had to learn early on when I was teaching elementary school, sometimes I read too fast, because I read based on how I understand what I'm looking at. But I had to slow down and read it to the students at a slower pace. So if someone says something to you and you do not understand what they said, or you're unsure, especially if you're doing like shorthand, you can go back and ask them to make sure, because you want to make sure you're getting accurate information. Make it natural when you engage with them. Don't make it seem kind of like robotic. Take notes, but make sure that you don't lose focus. So sometimes, I know when I was doing I took shorthands, and then I also recorded them as well. So that way, if I missed something in shorthand, I could go back and listen to the recording and then get what I missed, instead of having to keep asking them to respond or taking a long time for me to write exactly what they're saying. And then that leads you to consider a backup recording option if necessary. And then also what I do now currently, because I do virtual interviews, I tell them up front, I ask them, can I record? I also tell them I'm going to be asking them questions, but I also let them know if you do not hear a response right away from me, or we move to the next question, it's because I'm writing what you're saying. And I know for me, sometimes I got to focus, or I'll type what I'm saying to the next person, so they'll know it's not a long, awkward pause, but I'm typing up what they said. Another tip is don't let power relations intimidate the process. So here I'm at a medical school. So sometimes the scholars who come in, I interviewed them, their parent or someone close to them could be a research mentor or something, which they could be in the interview. And then also sometimes we're interviewing medical students to be a part of the program as a peer mentor. You don't want the role that a research mentor, because they teach them, have an influence. So you make those people feel comfortable, whatever that role could possibly be, whether it be someone that's a supervisor to someone that's under them, or someone that's a teacher to a student. You want them to feel comfortable that there's no right or wrong answer, and that you value their input, and that every experience is important. But you also want them to know that even though they sign a consent form, they also have the option to withdraw, and they won't be penalized if they don't feel comfortable for still doing the interview. So this is especially important, because I don't think that I thought about that when I was doing my dissertation, but when you move further along, it's important when you're interviewing students, because you don't want them to feel like, oh, I got to say the right thing to her, or I got to say what she wants me to say because she's coordinated with the program. She makes sure I get the money that I'm supposed to get. You want them to feel comfortable to give you their honest opinion about whatever the question is that you're asking. Next, you don't want to assume. So I know somebody mentioned in the previous prompt about do not let your bias interfere. So that would go here. Make sure you have an open mind. It doesn't matter what you may or may not have heard about that particular person that you're interviewing, or about the question, your own opinions about the question, or what you think the response should be. Be open to whatever they have to say, so that way you can clearly hear them without being distracted by your own bias or assumptions. And make sure you give them your full attention. And sometimes you can let them know that you're giving them your full attention by going back and restating what they said for clarity. So one thing before we get into our first activity, so there's two types of interview types. So there's structured and there's unstructured. So for the structured one, the questions are in order. They are closed-ended questions. All the participants are asked the same questions and they have the same answer choices. So it kind of sounds more like a survey. And then it only gives you quantitative data. It requires less time to kind of score it. And then it reduces your bias in the questions that you're asking, or for you to impose bias in the responses. Whereas for an unstructured, it's more conversational, it's more relaxed. You use open-ended questions, and then because you're using open-ended questions, they can be flexible. Sometimes people prepare and sometimes people don't prepare. They may stick to the topic, but then ask or add or take away questions depending on how the interview is going and the responses that are given. And then usually all of the responses are opinion-based, and of course, it gives you qualitative data. So for the interview protocol design, use a script. So we put a script for people that sometimes, freeze up or they forget what they're going to say. You could put what you're going to say in the beginning, meaning like what the research is about, what the benefits are, what the risks are. And then you can get into, if you need to write down your conversation starters, if you need to write those down as well. And then you can get into your questions. So for qualitative interviews, I mostly use open-ended questions, and I know someone mentioned open-ended questions. And with the open-ended questions, it's so you won't get just a yes or no response, unless you want quantitative data where you only yield a yes or no. And then that way they're allowed to give their opinion and be able to expound on what the question is asking. You also want to make sure your research guides your questions so you stay on topic. You want to start with the easy questions first, and then move on to the hard questions. And then if you're a person who is using mainly the topic for your questions, but not a strict set of questions, you could be flexible to add or withdraw questions as you go. And then also be mindful of the time that it's taking for you to ask the questions and for them to give the response. And then another key thing is, once you finish your questions, before you actually meet with your interviewees, you can test out some of these questions or pilot test it with somebody that you know and you trust. So they can tell you, like, I think that question needs to be reworded, or this question doesn't make sense, or I would ask this question before or after the other question. So here's the first activity. So at the bottom, and I can't see it, so you should have the circles on the left and the right. They say open or close. So you should be able to drag the circle to the one that you think it matches. So we have these sentences or questions in the middle. How can we change these meanings? You would drag a circle to it if you think it's open or a closed question. Check the chat. Anybody? No questions. Okay. So for each question, you would drag a circle to show if you think that question is an open question or a closed question. Anybody have any questions before I start looking at the responses?
On my
I can hear
it
you.
says draw lines to match the image. So I think we have to draw a line to it because my circle doesn't move.
Okay, thank you for that. So you draw, some of them you can move it, and it could be the next activity where you can move the actual circle. So this one may be the draw line. Thank you for sharing that, for clarifying. So I'm just reading the questions as y'all going. First one is, how can we change these meetings? Do you like to read? What's the best way to gather ideas? Do you live in Texas? How would you describe the school to others? How can we improve employee? I think that says relations or retention. Okay. Employee retention. Okay, so it looks like we have some. All right, how can we change these meetings? So this one will be open-ended because it allows you to elaborate on your response. So tell exactly what you think. It could be, your response could be, these meetings need to be shorter. These meetings need to be more interactive. Do you like to read? Anybody wanna, because I know we can see the responses on here, but anybody wanna shout out, do you like to read, open or close?
Close.
Close, because that's a yes or no question. Either you do or you don't. All right. What is the best way to gather ideas? Would that be open or close?
Open.
Open, right? And that's kind of like broad ideas about what, but I'm assuming they would have a topic. Do you live in Texas? Open or close?
Close.
Close, because either you do or you don't. Now, if that said what city in Texas, then that would be different because there's so many cities that you can respond. How would you describe the school to others? Open or close?
Open.
Open, good. And then the last one, how can we improve employee retention? Open or close?
Open.
Open. All right, thank you. All right, did you find this lesson interesting or challenging? Just for that last activity that we did with the open or close. And you could put too hard, just right, too easy. So I see just right, too easy. Okay, my too easy people. So it looks like we have 5 out of 9 people. Okay, so good. Nobody said it was too hard. All right. So here's another activity. So you should see the dots at the bottom, so red dots. Drag the dots to the interview questions that belong to a sense of belonging protocol. So remember, we put in one of our tips to make sure that your questions are being guided by the research. So let's say that you're researching sense of belonging. Which questions will be appropriate for you to ask as an interview? So it's, I think it's 5 dots. Mine disappears when I try to go on it. But I think it's 5 dots, so it should be 5 sentences. Which ones do you think will be appropriate with a sense of belonging protocol? And I'm just going to read the questions as you're selecting it. So we have, what does it mean to be at home somewhere? Do you have a certain way that you study for tests? What do you do when you have a hard time learning a concept? Can you tell me about a time when you felt that you belong to a particular group? What are the different ways that educators play a part in creating an inviting environment? Can you tell me about a time when you felt like you did not fit in? What do you do when you're trying to meet a deadline? In what ways does creating an environment make an inviting environment make students feel valued? And do you have a certain place that you like to study? Oh, so it lets you put more than 5 dots on here. All right, what does it mean to be at home somewhere? So I see 4 people say that it is for a sense of belonging protocol. That would be correct, because a lot of people, when they feel that they belong, like they feel at home, they found a new home, or like, you know, the saying says, home away from home. All right. Do you have a certain way that you study for tests? That would not be appropriate for this one. This one would be appropriate more for self-directed learning or test taking strategies, learning strategies, that type of thing. What do you do when you have a hard time learning a concept? So that would also go for self-regulation, self-directed learning, study aids, test management, test taking skills. Can you tell me about a time when you felt that you belong to a particular group? So this is correct. It would be for sense of belonging. Because sometimes the groups that they have makes you feel at home or like you're a part. But if they do not have a group that you can participate in, then you may not feel a sense of belonging. What are the different ways that educators play a part in creating an inviting environment. That is correct too. It will also be a sense of belonging because it's talking about creating a space where people feel welcome. Can you tell me about a time when you felt like you did not fit in? This will also be a relevant question because it's kind of like the flip side of if you didn't feel like you belong, they want to know why. What do you do when you're trying to meet a deadline? Is not a part of this because this is talking about time management or learning to study strategies or self-regulated learning. In what ways does creating an inviting environment make students feel valued? This is also a sense of belonging, so that would be correct. And then do you have a certain place that you like to study? Would not be a part because it's mostly talking about self-regulation or time management or study skills. All right, thanks for participating. Did you find that one interesting, challenging? You can mark it saying too hard, just right, or too easy. So we have two said just right, okay. So we were following our interview protocol. We'll start out with the easy stuff and then move to the harder stuff. This will be on target since a lot of you said that the last one was too easy. All right, thanks. All right, so our last activity, because we have about 14 minutes, because I want to stay on time, generate 2 questions based on your topic. So I'm sure all of you have your own research topic in mind. 2 questions, and then once you guys have put your questions on here, if we have time, we can take turns giving you feedback on your question. So 2 questions based on your topic.
Is everybody able to type on the screen? Because
No,
I'm not,
You can't?
I can't type
no,
on
you
it.
can't.
Okay. If you want to put the questions in the chat instead, that can work too. Because I know
Okay.
for sure you can type in the chat. And this one might be a little more difficult since it says draw. Sometimes they have it where you can type and sometimes they don't.
Yes, I can type.
Aisha, you have to select at the bottom the text icon to type.
Oh, okay.
But I still wasn't able to.
Yeah, once you select that, you're able to type.
Okay,
I'll
let
just
me
put it
try
in
it
the chat
again.
because the others let me type in, but this is not able.
If you want to share in the chat, we can do that too.
Okay.
Because I see one person could type and I see a couple people look like they're trying to start with a marker. And then it may depend on what kind of device you're using, I'm not sure. Okay, how important are local cures and foods to your daily wellness? Sounds like a good question. So for the person who wrote this question, I have a question for you. Are you interested in knowing why? Because like if you say, how important are local cures and food to your daily wellness? What if my response to you is, it's not important at all? Is that enough information for you, or do you need a follow-up question, or do you want that to be a 2-part question? How important are local cures and foods to your daily wellness? Why or why not?
I think maybe the question should be why, or it would definitely have had a why.
Okay.
Because I think because I'm usually doing quantitative, in my brain, I was like, there must be a Likert somewhere in here, but
Okay. Okay.
so
Yeah.
the why is important.
Okay. Yeah, you can do that too. And I was just thinking about myself, like, I think when I'm thinking about, I probably do not think about local cures. I just think about what's working best or what I want to do at the time. So if you put it that way, it may not be as important to me. But then if you say why, then that makes me think, okay, like really thought-provoking why. How does participation in IDP planning impact your interest in STEM careers? Okay, I like that question. Wait, who did this one? Did Dr. McSween do this one?
Yeah, I did.
I figured you did that one. Okay. What are some challenges you have faced as an LGBTQ plus identified individual in University of Virgin Islands? Okay, that's a good one. What are some strategies you use for managing the challenges you face? Okay, so that's a good follow-up question. And they definitely need to be back to back. So who wrote this one? Let me ask you a question.
That's me.
Let's
Dr.
say they
Cooper.
do not have any challenges, which 9 times out of 10 they probably have, but let's say they don't, then what?
You didn't read the whole question. What are you talking about?
Right here it says, what are some challenges you have faced as an LGBTQ plus identified individual?
That. Okay.
I think, I get what you're saying. I think that based on the introduction to the study, like here's what this study is about, that you probably wouldn't, that people who don't have any probably wouldn't end up included in the study.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you for that. How does a growth mind help you with solving every challenges with getting older? Okay.
Wait, I need to look at
So
that again. Wait a minute. That's not clear English.
how does having a growth mindset help you with solving challenges as you get older? Challenges.
Is that supposed to be every day, like everyday kinds of challenges?
How does a growth mindset, it's supposed to be, how does a growth mindset help you with solving everyday challenges with getting older?
Okay. Why do baby boomers feel challenged? I think it's supposed to be challenged having to use technology to check out at retail stores. Okay, I think that's a good question. So let me ask you this. The people that you're interviewing, they are only going to be baby boomers?
Yes, that's the group.
Okay, thanks. Let's go to the chat. Do you know anyone that has migrated to any of the 50 states since the 2017 hurricane? So and then you have, did that person have a college degree? So for these questions, they're not exactly open-ended questions, because you could say no to both.
That's true. I was thinking, some reason I wasn't thinking about open-ended. I have to
I mean, some people
elaborate
use
on it.
close-ended, but so I guess you have to think about the data that you're trying.
We're not seeing the question that you're referring to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the chat. I don't think it's going to show the chat on my screen.
Oh, you're in the chat. Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's the question in the chat. I do not want to mess up your name. At 2:49, the two questions that she has?
Aishi.
Aishi? So those questions would yield like, because you would get yes or no at
Yes.
those 2 questions. So if you want to make it open-ended, probably rephrase the question. What's your study?
Right. I'm going to rephrase it right now and then put it in.
Okay.
Okay.
How do you define?
So when you are phrasing questions like qualitative questions, should they begin with like how or why?
So those are good ways to start it, but those are not the only ones. But yeah.
Can you give us some ideas of how to start qualitative questions so it could be open-ended?
So usually you need to figure out what kind of information you want in your response to figure out how you should ask the question.
Yeah. But still, I mean, yes, it's all related to your topic, but how, why, what is there?
So
I'm
I
just trying
can
to
see
figure
what
out if there are certain openers, starters that
So
help
Sherry,
you.
you can say
You
something like,
understand the question?
yeah, so you can say, for example, how would you describe, right? So
Okay,
that
yes.
allows them to provide an open-ended response. Or you could say, please share an experience regarding, and then they'd be able to provide an open-ended response. It doesn't always have to be why or how, but as Dr. Edwards mentioned, just think about what your research questions are and what kind of information you'd like to get to answer those questions. And then you'd be able to generate the interview questions that align with the research questions, but they can be a wide variety. And so as she mentioned initially, you could start off with sort of easy questions, and those could be closed questions, those initial ones you start with, just to sort of get them comfortable speaking. And then as you transition to more of the open-ended questions that are actually relevant to your research question.
Okay, thank you. I wrote that down.
how do you define creativity is a good one? What are the leadership practices that you would associate with STEM education? I think that's a good one as well. And then so Aisha, you reworded yours. So what would be a reason you would consider migrating to one of the 50 states? I think that's a great one.
Okay.
Because, and then that one's good too, because let's say they didn't, but they're still able to answer that question, whether they did or they didn't. It gets them to think about if they were in that situation, what would be a factor. Okay. I think I got everybody. Let's see. Tell me if the uses of local curatives and foods are important to your daily wellness. Why not? Okay, I like that one. In your opinion, what characteristics define an effective mentor? I like that one too. I think that's it. Did I miss anybody? Did anybody else want to share or give their opinions about the questions that were shared? Okay. Any questions from anybody? Who asked a question about like a starter for qualitative interview question? Who asked that?
Sherry.
You said Sherry? Okay, so Sherry,
I did.
There's not a like a list, so to speak, but sometimes you can research examples of qualitative questions, or you can research questions based on what type of research, because sometimes they'll give you examples of questions related to like case studies or quantitative, or if you're evaluating a relationship or something. So if you need like a guide of something, sometimes you can look it up that way and look at what they have and then frame your question in a similar way. So you can frame your questions based on what information you want to gauge from the person or what methodology you're using and what's imperative for that study for the information that you want to get. Does that make sense?
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I was wondering about surveys,
Okay.
because we were dealing more with interview questions, and that's like face to face. How can you use surveys to be able to tap into the essence of the person's experience and pull out the information that you're trying to obtain?
So it would be similar to the interviews, except for usually when you use surveys, you get quantitative data. You can have like a
Does
qualitative.
it always have to be like a Likert scale kind of thing, or you can also add open-ended questions and then work your survey into like themes and put it through a analyzing quantitative tool?
So if you want to gauge quantitative data, you're going to need to use a Likert response, but you also can add qualitative questions in there as well, but you wouldn't put that part in the quantitative analysis. So like for an example, when we evaluate our program, we have ours in sections. So we have like a section for the academic part, and you have questions based on those particular activities. And then we have a section on the research part, and those questions are based on those activities. And then we have a section on the IDP, and those questions are based on just the IDP. But then at the bottom, we will have like qualitative questions like, please share some strategies that might improve X, Y, and Z. And then when it's time to analyze that data, we'll take the quantitative part and analyze those a lot of times individually per section, because we want to yield those results to present them independently. But then for the qualitative part, we analyze that in a different way than we do the quantitative part.
So is that considered mixed methods?
So that is a great question, if it's considered mixed methods or not. So for the studies that I have done, I've done mixed methods, but I didn't call it mixed methods with just having those qualitative questions at the end. I also did the interviews as well and engage other qualitative pieces to make mine a mixed method study.
Interesting.
Dr. McSween, do you have a specific answer to that? Because I don't know if just having like one or two qualitative questions at the end of a survey would make it a mixed method. I think it would still probably be quantitative, because the primary research and analysis is quantitative. But
no, what if your primary research is qualitative?
Well, I think what Dr. Edwards is getting at is that generally when you refer to your study as mixed methods, you want to have a balance of both quantitative and qualitative, not more heavy on quantitative and a little qual, more heavy on qual and a little quantitative. Generally, best practice is to have a balance between the techniques or strategies that you use to be able to truly call it mixed methods.
So, okay, so like you could do like maybe like a survey and then do like an interview?
Yes.
Would that be considered mixed
Yeah,
method?
but whatever, I guess, questions you're asking, they need to have some overlap so you could sort of compare the results from your qualitative to your quantitative to be able to answer similar kinds of questions, not something that's like completely independent per se.
And may I add that there is a resource that we shared with you in the prior email, Cresswell's book, as well as a couple other resources that were provided by our presenters and ECC. And I would say share it a lot of times, especially if you're coming from qualitative to quant, there has to be a really clear design structure where the qual is informing the quant or the quant is informing the qual. So there's an emergent methodology that has to be really specified so that you have a rationale for why you're having both quant and qual in the same analysis.
Okay, I'm lost now, but I understand what you're saying.
I'm gonna send you some resources. I know you.
Yeah, but I don't know how to do that yet. But yes, I understand the balance. And one leading the other. I get it. Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions from anybody else?
You don't want me to ask no more questions?
Oh, feel free to ask how many questions you want.
Now be quiet. I'm just kidding.
Any questions for anybody else, including Miss Sherry? No questions. You had a survey I think that they needed to complete, or no?
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to put the link in the chat right now for you to fill out a post-assessment. You'll also receive an email from my team so that you can, because we're going to stalk you a little bit, because what we want to do is be in a position to make sure that whatever we're doing is done well and that it is contributing to the development of your research. I mean, or we're going to stop doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat so that we can, solicit some responses from you in regards to this great work. So you'll see the link, bam, it's in there now. And so we want to pause and thank everybody that attended. Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Thank you, Dr. McSween. We're very appreciative as you help us to continue to build out the research capacities for the university and for our students. I do want to encourage everyone that's here. Do know that those resources that were sent to you in a link are available, and the video and booklet will be coming out in the upcoming week. So you'll have those resources to refer to again. And I'm just going to ask all of y'all that's on here to give our lovely presenters, a reaction hand clap for this hard work that they have engaged in for us today. So
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Do know that another email will be coming out with these documents and the materials will be available to you. Thank you again, everyone. And we're going to conclude our session as we are 7 minutes past the hour. Y'all have a great day.
I want to say thank you that these sessions, I didn't say this in the beginning when you was asking about example of a growth mindset, but I finished my coursework like in 2019, and then the pandemic came and everything else happened, surgery, everything happened, stopped working. And I thought that I had forgot how to do research. And since my topic was growth mindset, I had to constantly be reminding myself that I can't be doing research on this and I'm here fluttering. So I had to really get myself together and put myself in gear. And these kind of sessions really helped me to be reminded and hone my skills. So I just want to offer a big thank you to both Dr. Cummings and Dr. Sweeney for pushing out these opportunities.
I want to be mentioned in your bestseller, so you get that done. Okay.
Yeah, we're all rooting for you.
Yes, we want to be in the bestseller. I'm gonna be in the background like this. Okay, so we know that you're gonna get it done. Anybody else that's on the call that you feel like you're in the space as a struggle, just remember to retain the growth mindset. Failure is not an end. If we learn how to welcome it and then figure out what is the next step, then it'll never be the thing that stops us from accomplishing what we need to accomplish.
Thank you for attending our final session in the Fall 2023 Research Pipeline Training Series. We will be back in spring 2024. Bye!